Greetings to those who watch below. Before we start today's video, I'd like to give a huge shout out and say thank you to those who dwell below. An exclusive channel membership that can get you shout outs at the start of every video. If you'd like to find out more, check out the link in the description box. So thank you to Steffi Ray, Wicked Witch, Jess Black Curtain, Lisa Watts, Lefty Kim, Christina Groves and Finn McCool. In today's video, we are again exploring the mysterious and terrifying entity known as the Hat Man. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. My Hat Man Experiences by Virtigogh. So, I've had a few Hat Man experiences, but none are like what I've seen others have. I'm 24 years old, and have been seeing him around my parents' house since I was very little. Maybe 4 at the youngest. A little setup about my parents' house. It's in the south and was built in 1920. It's a very old and small farmhouse. Every room connects in a big circle apart from the kitchen and dining room, which come off the living room. In my first encounter, I was around 4 or 5 years old. I know I hadn't started school yet, and my brother and sister had. They were at friends' houses this night while my dad was at work. Me and my mother were sitting in the living room, which has a small hallway that leads to a bathroom in it. The bathroom then connects to my bedroom, which connects to my parents' room, which connects to the living room, where me and my mum were. So we see the bathroom light flicker from the living room, and my mum is visibly afraid of this. We are Italian Catholic, so she has a big fear of demons and ghosts and such, as her parents were straight from Italy. But me seeing her scared, and me being the only boy in the house, I got up to check it out, even though she told me not to. Well, when I run into the bathroom, I see the light flicker one last time, and as I walk in, I see a very tall shadow man with a fedora-like hat walk into my room. This guy is tall, taller than anyone in the family. He reached the top of the doorway, so he was around 6 feet and some inches. Everyone in my house is between 5'3" and 5'10". Well, I chased him to see who this was, being a dumb kid, and I chased him from my room to my parents' room to the living room with my mum. I saw him walk through the doorway to the living room, but when I got in there, it was just my mum, and I asked if she'd seen him, and she said no, leaving me confused. I didn't even know what ghosts or demons were at this point. When I was around 6 or 7, I was laying in bed very late one night on the top bunk, and I see someone from my parents' room walk into my room. I assumed it was my dad, because it sounded like a man walking, but I was supposed to be asleep, so I just pretended that I was. Being on the top bunk, I couldn't see the door to my parents' room from where I was, so it wasn't until the man walked into the middle of the room that I saw it was the very same tall man with a fedora-like hat on again. I didn't move, but I watched him go up to my closet and go into it. I just sat there waiting for him to come out until I fell asleep. I never did see him come out from that closet. My third encounter was more recent. In 2020, I had moved back into my parents' house the year before to help with some medical issues my mum was having and had to stay there due to COVID. My brother still also lives there. So one night I'm chilling in my room again and the door to the bathroom is open, and out of the corner of my eye while on my laptop, I see someone looking at me from behind the doorway, peeking out at me. I thought it was my brother and he needed my help for something, so I take off my headphones and look over, and I stare at him, the Hat Man again. We just sat there looking at each other for a few seconds before he quickly goes behind the doorway. I would like to mention that this doorway has maybe 4 inches of wall behind it from where he was peeking out, before the wall turns into the longer wall in the bathroom. The other side of the longer wall is the closet in my room. As a few notes, I've seen him peeking many times and walking past doorways many times over my whole life, and we've always lived in that same house. These are just my major occurrences with him, and I've never seen him stay peeking for any amount of time when I looked at him other times. I also want to mention that around 12 or 13 years old, my mother put crosses over almost every doorway in the house, except my closet door and the 2 doors that lead to the bathroom. One of those being in my room and the other in the hall. I always see him in those areas now too, where the crosses aren't, like he's trapped between that hall, the bathroom, the closet, and my room. It's almost like a small little square of the house with walls separating the rooms. Another note, I am not the only one who's seen him in my house. My brother, sister, and mom have as well, and they all describe him the same way as I did, before I even told them that I'd seen him. I also hear him walking around, and a few times I was home alone showering and had the door to the hallway locked, and someone jiggled the doorknob on more than one occasion, like they wanted to come through. But I'd get out to check around the house and find no one home. Another time me and my brother were in our room, and we heard 3 knocks come from inside the closet, while the door was closed. We both looked at each other and looked at the door, and said fuck that, and kept on our computers and ignored it. I also want to mention that at no point in seeing the Hat Man have I ever felt fear, but the opposite. He's always felt friendly and lost. I've only felt fear when the doorknob shook on several days, and when the 3 knocks came from the closet. I also want to mention I believe my house has others wandering the same area as Hat Man, as me and my siblings have seen and heard other things that don't fall in line with the Hat Man we know. Everyone seems to know about Hat Man. Do you? By CasaurusRex. I was 12 years old, living with my father and my younger sister. In between mine and my sister's room, there was our shared bathroom. We both usually kept the doors closed, as we were still young, and having the doors open kinda creeped us out. But one night I was too lazy to get up and close the door, so I left it open and just ignored it. Be me fast asleep for a few hours. The sound of glass shattering jolted me awake. I look into the bathroom, and I see that the window has been broken, and there's somebody crawling in through the window. I was terrified. I couldn't move or scream. In my head I was screaming for my father, who I couldn't believe didn't hear the window breaking. My nose hairs were tingling, which is a weird thing my body does when I'm beyond horrified. So I'm watching this motherfucker crawl through the window. When he was all the way inside, he stood up to his full height. He had to have been at least 7 feet tall. He was wearing a long trench coat, boots, and this oddly shaped old-fashioned looking hat. He walked towards me and stood inches from my bed, hovering over me. I couldn't really see his face, but I could feel him scrutinizing me. I lay there as still as I possibly could, pretending I was still asleep. After what seemed like forever, he walked over to my chest of drawers and began rummaging through all my clothing. I was so confused. What did this man want with a 12-year-old girl's clothing? He would keep looking towards my direction and just stared at me. Soon he must have gotten agitated, because he started throwing all my clothes out all over my floor, still confused. After what seemed like forever, he finally stopped. He walked over to me and hovered once more. It seemed like hours. Then he promptly turned around and walked back to the bathroom. Instead of leaving out the window like he came in, he just walked through the wall. I knew in that instant I'd seen a ghost. Still too frightened to move, I hid under my blankets and eventually fell asleep. I was woken up in the morning by my disgruntled father, upset because all my clothes were scattered all over the floor. Years later, my dad encountered the same figure. He was walking to the store and had to walk past the railroad tracks. He described the man I saw that night, standing in the middle of the tracks, around 100 feet away from him, just staring. He said he tried to ignore the man and keep going, but when he successfully crossed the tracks, something in his gut told him to turn around. When he did, he realized the man had somehow jumped forward 70 feet in a split second. He told me he turned around and ran off as fast as he could. A Little Hat Man Compilation by BP26. When I was 5, I woke up to some noises. I could see this blacker than pitch black figure with a coat and hat grabbing my toy hamper and climbing through this little door to get to the pipes in the ceiling. This was my first time feeling dread, and it wasn't sleep paralysis, because I was able to cover my face with blankets and wait to go back to sleep. When I was 10, my family was saying goodbye to our family friend downstairs. I was at the computer upstairs and was called down to join. When I came back upstairs, before I walked into the room, I saw this huge, pitch-black figure with the same hat and coat through the crack between the door and the wall. It was so black and real, I couldn't see the computer screen on the half he was standing in front of. I froze in dread and shock and had to keep calling for my mum to come upstairs to feel comfortable enough to move. Between this story and the next, I went to Poland for 2 months and was spiritually cleansed by our family friend who's become somewhat of a known healer there. There was a very weird experience that he explained before I told him what I felt. He cleansed my grandparents' house over video chat, and when he got to the room I saw the Hat Man in, he started coughing and hung up. He later explained that he was not prepared for such an evil job, and described the exact being to my grandparents as I had seen. No one told him. Fast forward to me being 19 last year in a new house. I was just watching a show in bed when I felt the same old dread creep up. I have a sparkly tree decoration in my room, and I was sure I saw a branch bend, so I ran out of my room and woke up my mum in the next room. We waited a little bit to go back, and went back with the intention to sleep. As I rounded the corner and looked in, I just saw a faint blob of a shadow towering in my room, so I ran again. This time when I looked back, I saw the Hat Man darting faster than the speed of sound seemingly, and I thought it was chasing me, so I screamed even more. But then I watched it dart straight through the front door. Needless to say, I slept on the living room floor. Hat Man, Things I Never Want to See Again, by 4 Aces 80 Deuce. Somehow, I was randomly browsing through the many channels and services I have on my TV when I came upon this documentary about the Hat Man. I read the brief description and decided to watch. Ugh. I was immediately taken back to my childhood and what happened to me, the first time. It was 1985, I believe. I was a teenager, 15 years old. I was a very large athlete. I worked out all the time, played multiple sports. I was a jock. No drugs, just a clean, healthy guy. I did have one secret though. I was dabbling in the realm of evil, for all the wrong reasons. I was an outcast at the school I attended, even though I was a great athlete. I was the hillbilly kid from the sticks, compared to my suburban classmates. I was taunted and teased all the time, to the point that I decided to delve into satanic prayer. Well, it sure as hell didn't take long for things to get strange for me. I had a bedroom in the basement of our house, a room and floor all to myself. You guessed it. The superimposing, blacker-than-night figure appeared at the base of my bed. I was literally paralysed in my bed, wide awake and staring at a figure so black that I couldn't see his face in the dark. He was wearing a long trench coat and had a hood. I didn't see any face or body image, just that it was almost as tall as my room. It stood at the foot of my bed. I couldn't scream out. I couldn't move. It leaned onto my bed. I could feel the mattress sink in where it placed his hands as he got closer to my face. All I could think of was one thing, the Lord's Prayer. I began to recite it in my mind, while also was willing it to go away. I finally somehow got the strength to move. I pulled the covers over my head and prayed more. He was still leaning on the bed. I knew this was the devil himself because I had called upon him. Eventually, he went away that night, but I was not free of it. I had another encounter later on in my life, even though I no longer dabbled in the evil arts. Why am I writing this? Because I want to warn people that the Hat Man is real. Each appearance he made to me was followed by the death of someone I knew personally not long after. I took him to be the Grim Reaper, since he was associated with death on many encounters. But for many others, he simply seems to be sinister. I would also like to add that I witnessed a UFO sighting as well. I had 2 buddies and my brother that also witnessed it. This was years apart, but the documentary I watched seemed to relate the two for whatever reason. Am I crazy? Not really. Do I believe that I have seen and encountered things I cannot explain that make me sound odd? Yeah. For some reason, my sister had asked me a couple of odd questions many years later about ghosts. My skin crawls that I have to tell this stuff because of the anxiety that it causes me again. If so many people relate to this, or have experienced similar things globally, what is it? Shared Hat Man Sighting by ThatPDXgirl. Here is mine and my ex-boyfriend's shared experience with the Hat Man. This was either late 2002 or 2003. My ex-boyfriend and I were sleeping in our apartment in West Salem, Oregon. We both woke up simultaneously in a shared sleep paralysis. Standing in our open doorway, but not coming actually through the door into our room, stood a good 7 foot tall, blacker than the black night around it figure. It was as if it sucked all light, even from the darkness. There stood this thing. It looked like it was either wearing a cape or a trench coat, had some type of fedora or cowboy hat. We were absolutely terrified. This thing just emanated pure evil, hate, disdain. We couldn't speak to pray it away, so I started praying in my head. I could think everything just fine and normal, but the second I tried to string a prayer together in my head, my thoughts were jumbled to where I couldn't even string a prayer together sensibly. This is something that has happened to me regularly during sleep paralysis when there is something evil in the room. You can think everything just fine, but the second you try to pray, suddenly it's like they don't want you to pray, and you can't even think the words to the prayer. That's why I don't care what anybody says. I know these things are evil. So I just fought and kept trying, and eventually I could get the prayer out in my head. Finally it disappeared, and both of us were able to move and speak again. We stayed awake the rest of the night, absolutely terrified. This is one reason why I don't give a crap what anybody thinks, including scientists when it comes to sleep paralysis, because I had shared one with somebody. You don't freaking share physical stuff like that, as well as hallucinations. We broke up in summer of 2003, but we remained good friends. We had never heard of this entity or anybody else seeing it. Fast forward to 2014, I'm watching that documentary about sleep paralysis called The Nightmare. I still had no clue that this Hat Man entity was a thing that other people had seen. I just about crapped my pants when in this documentary it starts talking about all these other people encountering this entity, and the graphics depicting it was spot on. Immediately I go to Facebook Messenger and tell my ex-boyfriend about it. He was living in New York at the time with his girlfriend. He excitedly says, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you just messaged me telling me this, because I literally just watched the same documentary a couple of nights ago and meant to message you, but just haven't had the chance yet." So that was pretty coincidental, but having the experience validated when we had no idea anybody else had ever experienced that particular entity, well, I guess it was kind of cool having it validated. But that also made it much more terrifying, because for those of us who have seen this entity, there's zero denying it's real. Why some people have seen it, I have no clue, but it seems to hate humanity. Hi guys, thank you so much for listening to today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, making sure you hit the notification bell so you know when the next video goes live. So, until next time, sleep tight.